Good morning, dearest friends. Today is Monday. What is it? It's January 31st. So it's already Rosh Chodesh February, probably, right? And also Chavtes Shvat.
You got Rosh Chodesh February and Shvat together. Although it's not the first of Shvat.
Tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. Shabbos, we already blessed the new month of Adar. So we're in holy times, joyous times, blessed times. And we're gathered here to study the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time at the moment, studying Mesechus Shabbos, Perek Echad Asar, chapter 11. We're on page 100, all the good things. And we are going to start a new Mishnah today. Of course, we're dedicating our learning for the good health and well-being of the dearest devoted members of the Chabura and their households. I want to mention a name. We'll also learn Liloi Nishmas. She passed away yesterday. Rosa Leah Bas Yaakov. And I'll also mention someone in the shul whose mother is very sick. Yardena Bas Rus. Should also have a Refuah Shlemo Kreva. And we should only have good news, again, for our Chabura, their households, and all of Klal Yisrael. We are in Perek HaZorik. Perek HaZorik, the chapter, has afforded us the opportunity to parse different aspects of Haitza'ah, of causing an item, carrying an item from one domain to the other. We spoke about them. We're talking about some of the lesser conceived arrangements, starting off, of course, with throwing, and then different kind of distinct arrangements and the exact parameters of what is a Rishus Hayachid. We talked about the dimensions, and then we talked about a whole variety of other interesting scenarios. We finished off yesterday actually talking about can you have a Rishus Hayachid underwater if it has the right dimensions, and the Gemara seems to say that there can. Before that, we spent a while talking about a bor, a pit, and different ways that it can be shrunk or expanded or divided, and we parsed the different kinds of materials. You may recall our discussion about a machzelet, which is certainly very interesting, and I yashakach Dr. Stalman for posting that link. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you'll find it interesting, although I'm not going to give it too much airtime on the recording. No. So that is that. We're going to start a new Mishnah. And good news for us, the Mishnah is going to be somewhat familiar because it was already referenced, and some of the analysis was already quoted in earlier discussions. And we're now at this point in Perek HaZorik where there's a series of Mishnahs going through different variations. We're going to end up talking about boats and water, which we teased previously, and we're going to get some more proper treatment. And then before long, we'll be concluding chapter 11 and moving on to chapter 12. Not today, but that's what's in our forecast. Again, thank you for joining us on the last day of winter. Let's share the screen and get started. Here we go. The format is right. Let's add Rashi. Let's find the right. They have us behind a bit. One second. Here we go. Again, as I told you, this is somewhat familiar. Perhaps Rashi, that's one of the reasons why Rashi doesn't comment here. And before we go on to the Gemara, I want to take a look at the halachic works and see how they record this teaching. And again, let's see if we remember some of the analysis, some of the conversation that the Gemara presented last time we were introduced to this Mishnah. Hazoirek arba amos b'koisel. You throw an object a distance of 4 amos, and it's going to hit a koisel. What's the game? What's the game called where you throw a ball at the wall? Oh, come on, folks, help me out over here. This is the
handball.
I'm sorry, handball.
The handball or dodgeball. You actually
dodgeball. We're talking about some of the essential recreation of urban living. Perhaps is the professor on? The professor's not on, but if he would probably further cringe at our sports analogies. But if you throw a ball at the wall at a distance of 4 amos, so again, the Mishnah doesn't give us commentary. So let's just read the Mishnah as is, and then of course we'll remember some of the questions that the Gemara. Hazoirek aramas b'koisel. You throw something 4 amos at a koisel. L'malam asar tfachim. If it lands above 10 tfachim, or I should say, if it hits above 10 tefachim. Kizorik ba'avir, it's as if he simply threw something in the air. Because remember, we're talking about a person who's in Rishus Harabim ostensibly, and higher than 10 tefachim is not Rishus Harabim. And so if it doesn't land and it's somehow suspended in the air, it lands on the wall, maybe, not maybe, the Mishnah says it would be considered like it just was in the air and he is potter. If he threw it and landed under 10 tefachim, kizorik ba'aretz. Now it's like he threw something on the ground. And therefore the halacha is hazorik ba'aretz arba ames chayiv. If you throw something 4 ames, it lands on the ground, you are chayiv. If you notice, to understand the Mishnah, even just to explain it as is, we added a lot of commentary just to make sense of this Mishnah. Again, not long ago, we parsed this Gemara. Hey, good morning. We discussed this Gemara quite a bit. Here, actually, let me take back what I said. Let's do the Gemara fast, and then I want to take out. We're going to scroll back up to the Mishnah and see how it trickles into the halachic works. Again, this is going to be familiar. The Gemara asks, if the item hits the wall, items don't usually just stay on the wall, right? You play, is it dodgeball or handball? Imagine, again, maybe this isn't the perfect analogy, but let's just imagine for a moment you're playing one of these games. The ball doesn't stick on the wall. It bounces back. It doesn't rest at the location where it hit. And so the ball didn't come and have a hanacha, right? How do you kaitza is when something is transported from point A to point B, and it has an akira. It was picked up from the ground from a place, and it had a hanacha. It was placed. If akira, it's uprooted, and hanacha, it lands a greater distance than 4 ames in a public domain. Well, then by gali you're chayiv, but here it didn't land. That's what the Gemara asks. Let's see how Rabbi Steinsaltz explains the question. It didn't come to rest on the wall. And if it did come to rest somewhere, it probably bounced back into within the distance of 4 ames. And so it's landing, it's really traveled less than 4 ames. It didn't come to rest on the wall. There was no placement. It landed less than 4 ames. So the act of throwing against the wall is not the end of the process. Rabbi Yochanan says, actually, it did come to rest on the wall. How? Because it was very sticky. And a very sticky item can become stuck on the wall. You know, maybe you're familiar with this, but every once in a while we take our kids to one of these places with games. You know, you get tickets, you can redeem the tickets for toys, arcades. Familiar with this? And so they make these sticky hands. I guess you could buy it. You could also just buy it, but they make these sticky stuff. Rabbi, have you ever seen those rubbery hand things that you slap, whatever?
Rabbi, I'm thinking of something else. Why doesn't someone ask the obvious question, stick to the wall for how long?
Explain more, elaborate. What do you mean?
If you throw something, it's on the wall for, 1 minute, then it falls down.
But how does something land on a wall? Walls don't typically, a flat wall. How could something land on a flat wall?
It depends how sticky the item is.
So it's going to have to be sticky. So the answer, of course, Rabbi Yochanan gave, and we quoted this earlier, is b'dveila shmeina shaninu. We're talking about a juicy cake of figs, and it's sticky and it sticks to the wall. I said that if it would be in contemporary times, we would talk about a spaghetti on the wall, or maybe one of these sticky, gooey putties, or
Yeah, you have the kids' toys. The kids'
toys, exactly.
Luck, whatever they call it.
Yeah. So that probably would be an equal answer. In those days, they did not have those kids' sticky toys. They didn't quite have spaghetti that would stick on the wall, but they had a dveila shmena. They had a sticky, gooey, oozy cake of figs, and that would do a fine job sticking on the wall. And so, what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that when our Mishnah says you're chayiv or potter, We're not talking about handball. We're not talking about dodgeball. We're talking about a situation where the item actually sticks on the wall.
What about paint? You can throw paint on a wall, it'll stick to it too, and
So probably you're right. Probably that would be considered. I mean, there's other questions, of course. Are there other malachas involved?
You have kids' toys that have little suction cups at the end.
Right. So we'll
they
see
have
in the
those darts. They have those darts with the, that you shoot at, you can,
Exactly.
right. Right now the Gemara is going to get a little more complicated because initially our Gemara or the initial conversation here that the Mishnah triggered is something that sticks. That would be a scenario where something lands on the wall. Otherwise, there's no landing. It bounces back, and then you have to look at where it ends off. Not only that, but I imagine we could say with some of these sports, some of these games, the whole calculation is not so much where it hits on the wall as much as where it's going to rebound and bounce back. And so you have to take into account the full package, the full motion. The Gemara is now going to talk about another scenario, which is a tad more involved. Alan, is Alan on today? Okay. So first of all, in case you were wondering what it looks like, so our purple gartel, our purple belted man is going to demonstrate for us again how it's plausible that you could throw something and it lands. Over here, they don't show it really landing, but somehow it's there on the wall. What we're going to talk about next, however, is what happens if you throw it, an item, and it actually lands because there's a little crevice in the wall. You throw the right item at the right speed, you might be able to get it to land on a little crevice or a little thing on the wall. So that's going to be the next subject of the Gemara's discussion. I'm Rabbi Yehuda Marav. I'm Rabbi Chia. Zarak lamayla mi'asara. What happens if you throw something and it lands above 10 tvachim? Above 10 tvachim, usually we say is, in the Mishnah says, it's not in the Rishus Harabim. It's landed in a no man's land of sorts. But the holcha v'nacha b'chur kol shehu. It landed in a shtickle hole, a crevice. So now what's the question? Well, here we'll see. Then it gets a little more complicated. If the item actually landed in the wall, now we have a machlokes to contend with between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis. I asked for Alan, and Baruch Hashem, now we get Alan. Welcome. Yes, Rabbi Errol?
I was just thinking about putting a kvittel into the kosel.
So yeah, what happens if you throw your... This would be very irreverent. Don't do it. But if you make a little paper airplane out of your kvittel and you throw it and it lands in the crevice in the kaisel, Rabbi Errol, maybe that's a good question. Now, do we say, oh, it's above 10 fachim? Or do we say that it landed into a hole? So that's what the Gemara says. Rabbi Meir. So now it gets interesting. And I'm going to read for you something over here. Rabbi Meir says, actually, I'm thinking maybe I'll open the original. No. Sometimes you have a space that is less than. Good morning, Mr. Fisher. How are you? I absolutely don't mind. I'm thrilled to see you. I'm just sorry that I can't give you a hand.
Well, don't throw more stuff in.
It's somewhere around.
This should be here because this needs to be colder.
It's wonderful that you.
Of
course.
All right. Pardon me, folks. All right. So there's such a thing as called chaykim lahashlam. I want to read for you a little bit just to explain what we're talking about. In the Gemara in Eruvin, there is a discussion about a doorway and its obligation for a mezuzah. Of course, Eruvin is not so interested in mezuzah. Eruvin is really interested in talking about Eruvin, but the conversation of Eruvin touches upon doorways and door frames and walls and etc., etc. So there's a question about the mitzvah of mezuzah. for a doorway to be chayev in mezuzah, it needs to have at least a height of 10 tvachim tall, 4 tvachim wide. Now there's machlokes. It's not as complicated. I'm saying don't brace yourself. It's a very simple machlokes. There's machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim about if your archway is rounded and it's 10 tvachim high, but at the height where it comes to where it narrows in, it is less than 10 tvachim. I'm sorry, it is less than 4 tvachim at the top. If you've seen more of an Oriental style, or maybe even we'll call it a Middle Eastern style, you might see a door that is not square, but it's rounded, and sometimes it comes up to a point, and maybe it has less than 4 tvachim of width. So Rab Meir says, although it is narrow, we do something that's kind of like a legal fiction. We conceptually imagine the wall being carved out so that it has the necessary dimensions to be chayiv in mezuzah. Therefore, such an entranceway needs a mezuzah. Although it is narrow on top, it is wide on the bottom.
Much cheaper here than in the States.
That is what Rabbi Meir says. The Chachamim say no. We don't employ a legal fiction in this regard. If it does not have the dimensions, then it doesn't need to have a mezuzah. That is a discussion about a pointy or narrow frame, door frame. But do we apply this principle that we're willing to use our mind's eye to conceive that a space is larger than it really is, or not? Let me see if we have any pictures here that will help us. No, they don't give us this picture. But hang on a second. I want to show you a picture just so that you could, I think this will make things easier. And I'm going to post it on the Chabura group. This I got from, hold on, folks, bear with me. I just want to send you a picture just to make life even a little easier. This is a picture, compliments of Art Scroll. Bear with me a moment. I think you can see my screen. Can you see WhatsApp opening?
No.
Well, you see the Gemara now?
Yeah, I got it.
Hold on. Okay, yes, I sent it on into the group. I'm also going to try to open it on our computer if it'll. There we go. Again, nothing fancy, but as you can see here, it's a doorway. It's quite narrow on top. You could still squeeze yourself through, but it doesn't have the width of four tefachim on the top. So if you follow the letter of the law, it doesn't have the dimensions for mezuzah. Rabbi Meir says we, in the mind's eye, we conceive that it's actually a wider frame than it is in order to warrant a certain halachic responsibility or obligation. It's not actually wide, but conceptually, there are obviously other criteria that I don't want to get into now, but we're comfortable occasionally expanding with a kind of legal fiction, if you will, expanding reality in order to accommodate certain Jewish observances. And so Rabbi Chia says that Rabbi Meir here would say, although the crack doesn't have the dimensions to be a conventional Rishus HaYachid, still, he'll say, you know what, although it doesn't have the dimensions of Rishus HaYachid, we will imagine that it has the dimensions of Rishus HaYachid. When I say imagine, I mean halachically imagine. Halacha will create a reality that it has the dimension, it's considered a Rishus HaYachid, even though it doesn't really have the proper measurements. Again, this is only a principle that can be wielded when there's a very specific instruction, but here Rabbi Meir is comfortable applying it. Amr lid Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir is comfortable conceiving, imagining, as if the space is actually wider than it is in order to trigger a certain benchmark or halachic responsibility. Mechayiv. He would say you're chayiv, even though it doesn't have quite the four tefachim rather of width, but the wall is thick and there's room to imagine that it would be bigger, and therefore you're chayiv. And the Rabbanan Damri ain't choikim lahashim. The Rabbanan say, just show me the reality. What's the picture? Let's take the measurements. It's there. It's there. It's not. It's not. No imagination. Lo mechayiv. Again, I'm simplifying the argument, but that's essentially what it sounds like. So again, Zorak Lamala Masar. You take something up from a Rishos Harabim and you throw it, and it lands above 10 Tvachim. If it's a public domain, you're potter. But if it lands on a private domain, you're chayiv. We have a crevice in the wall. The crevice of the wall is somewhat ambiguous. It shouldn't be anything, but maybe we imagine that the crack is just a little bigger and a little wider, and now it's a Rishos HaYachid. Our mayor says, yeah, we consider it to be Rishos HaYachid. It plays that role in this situation. The Chachamim say no. And guess what? Tanyan Amihaki. There's a brisa that precisely reflects this debate. Zorak Lamal Me'asara. You throw something in a public domain and it lands in a hole, even if it's kolshu, even if it has just the minute dimensions. Rabbi Meir Mechayver. Meir says we'll consider as if this is a rishus ha yachid. Why would he want to say this? I don't know. Azoy. That's what it is. All right. Now let's go back to let's go back here to the Mishnah. I'm going to take a look at the halachic works that quote this. So let's look at the Rambam. Let's see if he has. Hold on. Here. Hazoyrek arba amos. You throw something a distance of 4 amot for Rishus HaRabim in the public domain. V'noch hachefet ba koisa. And it landed in the wall. How? Kegoin shezorak chelev. So the Rambam does our exercise. Remember, we were trying to imagine other items other than a shmena, a dvela shmena, sticky figs. The Rambam does that. Maybe you have some kind of fatty stuff that's very sticky. Oibotzek or dough, v'nidvak b'koisa. And it sticks on the wall. Putty. The Rambam gets us very close to the kids' putty, or what do you call it? Anyways, any of those things. Play-Doh. If it lands and is stuck on the wall at a height greater than 10 tfachim, kizorek be'avir. It's as if he threw something in the air, and even though it's landed, it's essentially suspended in the air, not a public domain, not a private domain. So you're potter. Something is suspended in the air in the Rishus HaRabim. It is not in the Rishus HaRabim. It is in a Makom P'tur. And therefore you're exempt. Nidbak l'mata mi'asar tfachim. If the item sticks below 10 tfachim, kizorek ba'aretz, it's as if he threw something that landed on the ground. V'chayiv, and he's chayiv. Zorak l'mala mi'asara. But now we get our recently read scenario. Zorak l'mala mi'asara. He throws an item above 10 tfachim, but it's not sticky, but it lands in a hole. V'nach b'chor kol shehu potter. The Rambam clearly seems to be paskening like the Chachamim, who say we follow reality. The halacha follows the reality, halachic reality, and reality are in this case the same. A little hole does not create a separate domain. It doesn't have 4 tfachim of width, and therefore the item landed in a Makom P'tur. It landed in the air of the Rishus HaRabim. This is how the Rambam paskins, and this is how the Rambam explains the Gemara. And I like the way the Rambam helped us conceive of other sticky items beyond just the Devela Shmena. Look in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch quote over here doesn't even go into all that. This is too long of a text. This is also too long to. No. All right, so there we have it. An idea of what's going on over here. One more thing. All right, let me continue the Gemara now. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Now we're going to talk about another interesting scenario, something that I suspect we may have not considered previously. Alan, do me a favor. Tell your wife I got her email, and I'm going to try to take a look at it today, if you don't mind.
He got your email, and he's going to take a look at it today.
Oh, did you ask him or did he say?
He said, thank you.
Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Yehuda quoted Rav to teach the following halacha along similar lines, defining a conventional or unconventional rishus hayachids in a rishus Rav. Something we would not have necessarily considered on our own, but the Gemara is going to teach it us. Teil hamitlaket asara mitoich arba. A mound which gradually climbs to be 10 tefachim tall, mitoich arba, within 4 amas. We're going to go to our wonderful pictures. So we'll see over here, this is a mound which gradually climbs upward. And if you measure 4 amas, it gradually comes up to be 10.
We don't see any picture, Rabbi.
Oh, no?
Not yet.
Okay, hang on. I have to change my new. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So the middle picture.
He's right-handed. I see.
He is now right-handed, and he's throwing a loaf of bread, and it's landing on top of a mound. The mound doesn't seem to have 4 tefachim of width in its point, but it does have 10 tefachim. It does rise 10 tefachim within a 4 amma expanse. That is what we're describing over here. Tail hamitlaket asara. By the way, today the word tail, if you talk to an archaeologist of any background, a tail is an important word. Rabbi Menachem, why is the tail an important word in archaeological language conversation?
It has layers.
So a tail is the word for an elevated space that was that built up over time over a ancient site. I believe that's approximately the round. So it means a mound, but it used to be that mounds would be indicative of something important and something that existed for a long time. And so usually old archaeological sites over old cities, old yishuvim are called tail whatever. And so usually, but just by the way, if you're looking, so you have today modern cities, and usually the modern cities are, not usually, but many times the modern cities are named for the ancient city in the region. And usually the archaeological dig of the original ancient city is called Tail X. So I don't know, what's a good example? Anyways, it's full of it. So anyways, but tail in Hebrew here means a mound with these conditions. So tail mitlaket asar mitacharba. You threw something that lands on top, you are chayiv. Rashi tila mitlaket. Shehu midron veholech. It's sloped, angular, and it continuously climbs upward. Umitlaket ma'at ma'at, and it gradually gathers ad shmak biyayud until it ultimately has a height of 10 tvachim. Mitoich daled amis, in a space of 4 amis. Harehu ki'ilu zakuf. We look at this wall, this inclining wall, as if it is upright. V'heve rishus hayachid, v'makim goyvay, and therefore it is a rishus hayachid at its peak. The imzorak rishus harabim, and if one throws or threw something from a rishus harabim, v'nach al gabav, and it landed on top of the tail, chayiv. V'dafke nakat mitoch daled amis. But this within 4 amis is with precision. The imitoich, if the slope was over a wider amount of space, harehu keshar rishus harabim. This is part of the typical. This is the typical way of a public domain to have ups and downs, and that's not considered a separate domain. The nicha tashmishte lehiluch. It is relatively feasible to navigate a space that is so gradually inclining and rising and falling. So, no more pictures for us at this point. So again, ground in a public domain is not expected to be perfectly flat. We've established that long ago. So just because there's a slight incline up and down, that's not going to make it a separate domain. But if it is steep enough to climb 10 tfachim high within a 4 amma space, that's a kind of incline that is so steep that in the eyes of halacha, it's considered practically a wall. You can only navigate it with great difficulty. Slopes, and there are other areas of halacha where this is relevant, especially in Eruvin. Occasionally, a mound can be considered a wall, depending on how steep it is. And it's essential that an Eruv expert consider and weigh in when one is hoping to consider a sloping area to be considered a wall. Sometimes around bridges, you have a sloping, or the backs of buildings slope downwards toward the water, or the like. And there are occasions where it might be able to be considered, but that again is for an Eruvin expert to consider. The condition is the sloping must be, like Rashi says, loy nicha tashmishte. It is very hard you can't easily use it. And so the formula that our Gemara is presenting to us is an incline of 10 tfachim in 4 amas or less. That's pretty steep. What is the, if Mark wasn't driving, I'd ask him to crunch the numbers and give us the calculation, but suffice it to say, it's not easy to navigate. Now, this is so important. Tanya Namihachi. This is indeed mentioned in the discussion of Eruvin. Mavoy. Let's see. So here we have a picture to show it to you first. You have a courtyard of sorts. That's here. It's walled in on 3 sides. The 4th wall, to be enclosed, there are certain criteria. There might need to be a lechi or other things. But if you have this really steep mound, that would be considered a wall that encloses it to the point where you would not need any other Eruvin related installments. Let's read it here.
So do steps, if there are steps that go up into the mavoy and then come down, would that constitute a wall?
I don't know. It's an important conversation, but I want to stick when it comes to the discussion of Eruvin and Mavois, I want to only analyze what the Gemara says. At this point, when we get to Maseches Eruvin, which folks is next stop, then we will be highly steeped in all of the intricacies of I'm protecting my again. I want to only tell you what I know clearly and without any guesswork. So you have an alleyway that the inside is flat, but in the entranceway, there is a midron, is a sloping mound. Regardless of if the mound, here, let's read it here. An alleyway that is level inside and becomes an incline or a decline plane to the public domain, or if the public domain or inside it is inclined. Basically, if the mavoy has this inclined situation, this mavoy that has this steep incline in its entranceway, it needs neither posts nor a cross beam or a string or whatever in order to be considered enclosed for the purposes of the laws of Eruvin. Rashi explains, what are we talking about here? For example, basically, if it's uneven, and so either the courtyard or the alleyway, I should say, really is elevated, or the public domain is elevated to the point where there needs to be a steep incline. So in either scenario, that would be considered an enclosure for the purposes of Shabbos. Rashi, the Oisai Gevoya, or Oisai Goiva, this height, should be tzad Pesach in the entranceway. Havale Mechitza, it's considered a proper wall. Afal Pishu Mushpa, although it is inclined, it's gradual. It's not a perfect wall. In the eyes of halacha, it it's considered a wall because it has the sufficient dimensions of steepness. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel indeed says, a mound which gradually climbs to be 10 tvachim high within 4 amos, and you throw something from a public domain and you land on top of the mound, chayiv, indeed, you are, or one is, chayiv. Interesting scenario. Not again, another situation where if you would stop the uninitiated on the street and ask them to try to describe a rishus hayachid, or if you'll show them a picture and says, hey, does this strike you as a private domain? You really would not consider that to be the case. But once we know both the typical dimensions of a private domain and this unique factor, which is that we consider these as walls that enclose and create a rishus hayachid, well, now you know that there's a lot more complexity to the topic than we might have otherwise considered. My dear friends, this concludes the next Mishnah. Again, just to give us a fast recap, our Mishnah is a Mishnah we were already introduced to, which introduces us to the notion of throwing something against a wall or at a wall. The Mishnah simply states, we look at the height of the item where it landed on the wall. Well, the Mishnah doesn't say landed, but we have to infer based on the Gemara's explanation. If it landed above 10 tefachim, well, then it's suspended in the public domain. That's a makam tor, you're exempt. If it lands below, well, then you are chayiv. And the Gemara clearly, or Rabbi Yochanan clearly establishes we're talking about something sticky. And the Rambam helps us expand our concept of what might have been sticky. We then go on to talk about a question of what if it didn't land because it's sticky, but it landed in a crevice? Well, you have the Rabbi Meir's opinion, which is that one would yet be chayiv. It would be considered a rishus hayachid. And then we have the Chachamim, and we saw the Rambam at least paskin like the Chachamim, that would still be considered, if it's above 10 tefachim, it's in the public domain. It's in the airspace of the public domain. Above 10 tefachim, it's considered a makom tor, and one would be exempt. We introduced the idea of choikikim. What was the word? Choikikim hashlim. If we'll in our mind's eye expand or build out a space to be halachically relevant. The mayor says yes, the Chacham say no. It looks like, at least in this case, the Rambam paskins like the Chacham. And then lastly, we're introduced to this interesting idea of the sloping mound. And if it has the right criteria, the right dimensions, that's considered a wall, both for the purposes of constructing a rishus hayachid to be chayiv if one throws onto that mound, and also to close in a mavoi and to be considered a wall for the purposes of eruvin. And again, when we get to Maseches Eruvin, we will revisit this idea, this item at length. Again, this is not in the laws of Shabbos. This is in the laws of, I believe, of Eruvin here. Actually, no, Shabbos. A alleyway that's enclosed on 3 sides, and it has this steep ramp down or ramp up. If it has the criteria of 10 tefachim high within 4 amos, it's considered a wall, and it's already enclosed. So the Rambam brings us this idea. I think I dropped it in the drawer there. Here, the Rambam, again, this is just exactly what our Gemara taught us. No, here. Tell him goiva asar tzvachim, a mound that gathers upwards to be a height of 10 tzvachim. Mitoich eirach arba ames harei rishus hayachid. So exactly what we just said. And then he quotes the Mabay thing too. Let us start a new Mishnah. This Mishnah, we will also have some visual aid, although it's not that complicated. We can really imagine it, I think, on our own. Any comments first before we continue the new Mishnah? All righty. Zorak, toich arba ames, a person throws an object within a rishus harabim. But how far does he throw it? Toich arba amos, less than 4 amos, which biblically, if you throw something or you carry something less than 4 amos in the public domain, one has not yet been considered to have carried. But Nisgalgal. The item then continued to roll. And when it rolled, it extended past the 4 amma distance. So you intended, or your initial throw was less than 4 ammas, but it then rolled. Potter. I'm sure this might catch some of us by surprise, because we would have imagined. Well, actually, Dr. Hammer, are you there? Dr. Hammer is going to tell us, of course, you're Potter. His kavana would have been to throw within 4 ammas.
Right.
And so what happens afterwards is not very interesting. Right?
Right.
And I think that rings true. That's how I would imagine it to be too. So let's see Rashi. Rashi qualifies that it's a little more complicated than we imagine. We're not actually talking about that it hit the ground. The imkain. I'm sorry, no, this is the next Rashi. I apologize. This is the next segment of the Gemara. Let's read the second half of the Mishnah. So again, if you throw something intending to throw it within 4 ammas, and it rolls beyond 4 ammas, the Mishnah says Potter, and that makes a lot of sense. He never intended to throw it more, and so why should you be chayiv? And I believe this point is so obvious that the Gemara really doesn't give it. Doesn't really give it much analysis. The next half, however, is more important more complicated. Chutz la'arba amis. What happens if the person is throwing something to land or to go more than 4 amis? But it ends up actually only going less. So here, your kavanah may have been to do something that is not Shabbos-ly consistent. You're not allowed to throw something 4 amis in the public domain. But it actually bounced back. It rebounded. It rolled back within 4 amis. So the Mishnah says chayiv. You're chayiv. Why should you be chayiv? It landed in a space that's less than 4 amis, and so you only threw less than 4 amis. So let's see Rashi. We're not talking about, according to Rashi says, that it landed on the ground. Because then it would be obvious. You threw, trying to think of something that would make sense. Let's say you threw a frisbee and you tried throwing it. The frisbee 4 amis, 5 amis, but the wind catches it and it rebounds. I would say a boomerang. The problem is, I think the boomerang, the kavana is for the unique movement. So a boomerang might be different. But let's say you throw a frisbee, you're trying to throw it, and the wind bounced it back. So the Mishnah says you're chayiv. Why should you be chayiv? It ultimately didn't go to a problematic distance. So had it actually landed, according to Rashi, I think you would be chayiv. If it landed 4 amis, then only rolled back, I think you'd be chayiv according to Rashi. Let's see the Gemara. Again, he threw something within 4 amis, even if it bounced, it rolled, it ends up going out of that space. You're potter, it's not what you intended, it's not what you did. Simple. Second half of the Mishnah, you intend to throw it in a problematic way. Vinisgalgal, usually nisgalgal means rolled. Rashi says that it didn't actually roll on the ground, but it was propelled back. You're chayiv. The Gemara is going to ask our question. How could you be chayiv if it landed within 4 amis? V'haloi no. Look at reality. It never came to rest in a problematic space. When I say problematic, I mean you're in the public domain. If you throw something for more than 4 amis and it lands, you're chayiv. But here it never landed. How can you be chayiv if it landed in or never landed in an area that would be problematic? Rabbi Yochanan comments, Behu, Shenach, Al Gabe, Mashahu. It would have had to initially land for a moment, and then only then bounce back. Let's read Rashi. Shenach Al Gabe, Mashu. Sh'amad Ktsas. It must have had a momentary pause. And only then it rolled or blew back. And Rashi, to be consistent, says this could also work if the wind caught it. And it had some airtime. It was suspended in the air. And only then it bounced backwards. So Rashi is saying it's plausible. Either the item literally landed on something, that would be simple. But it could even work if it was suspended in the air. And that's why I think the Frisbee example might be a good one. Because you could, and someone mentioned this idea earlier today. If you throw the Frisbee, it's caught up in the air, it's suspended for a moment, and then it bounces backwards. Well, then Rashi says that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that could be considered that it actually landed. As long as it's less than 3 tvachim of height. Because then, if something's within 3 tvachim and it's suspended, we say, it's as if it actually rested. Tanya Nami Hachi. Indeed, there's a brisa that affirms this idea. If you throw something for more than 4 amas distance, wind fought against it and pushed it back into 4 amas. Although it then went back out. I'm not sure how that works. Potter. If it bounced around your potter. If the wind held it in suspension, even if it came back within the 4 amas, you're chayv. So again, it seems like Rashi's explanation, and it seems like based on the Gemara's explanation, that if something has airtime, it hangs in the air, it suspends in the air, well, then you might be chayiv. And so maybe, I don't know exactly how boomerangs work, but maybe a boomerang could work like that. If you could engineer a boomerang to be so that it would stay, I don't know if it's spinning, if it's considered suspended, but if you can keep it in one space and then it bounces backwards, maybe halachically,
There's still room.
it would be considered to have landed. The wind hung it in the air. Interesting. Very interesting. So basically, we're going to have to say that when our Mishnah says it would have to have actually came to have a momentary pause, either by literally landing on something and bouncing back, but that would be maybe more obviously problematic. But even if it just spun out into 4 amas area, and it remains suspended in a way that halachically it could be considered to have rested, well, then one could be chai. Complicated, probably rare, but conceivable. That is what our Gemara is introducing us to. Let's see how the Rambam frames this. Zorak l'toich 4 amas v'nisgalu chutz l'4 amas patur. You throw it less than 4 amas, and it spins further. Chai patur, your patur. That makes a lot of sense, as the Mishnah right away establishes. Zorak chutz l'4 amas. But what if you threw it outside of 4 amas? V'nisgalu l'toich 4 amas, and then it bounced backwards. Im nachal gabi mashu. If it came to rest on something, chutz l'4 amas, v'achar kach nisgalgel v'nichnas. And then it bounced back and rolled back inwards. But if it never came to rest, then you're potter. By the way, if we're going to talk about football analogies or other, this is probably another good Gemara to introduce to the mix, because there's a question of if the ball is live or dead, if the play is still active, if it landed within the bounds or out of bounds, and what happens if you catch it in the air and you manage to pull the ball back into inbounds. So this probably has some football ramifications. And Dr. Hammer and Dr. Pasternak, I know you're the football fans here, so I need your help.
Right. I think you should be prepared, Rabbi, in 2 weeks from yesterday to do the play-by-play at the Super Bowl. I think it's an important new input. I mean, probably, maybe we could get some revenue for the shul out of it.
We could have a halachic football announcer. Have you seen the clip? There's a clip going around. Did Brady announce that he's retiring?
Yeah, but then it's unclear. It's a suffix. It's a suffix.
Suffolk. Oh,
See, that's why we need you, Rabbi. We need to deal with these issues.
these are important. These are indeed very important issues of great importance. And so, Dr. Pasternak, why are you're a Brady fan, but that's come from the Patriots. So you're really a Patriot fan, but you.
Erwin, you're muted. You have to.
He's trying to unmute.
Oh, okay.
What was the question?
I was trying to understand your support for the Patriots and for Tom Brady. This is connected.
I'm strictly a Brady fan.
So you're a Brady fan. Okay. I respect that.
So now I'm the Tampa Bay fan.
I hear you. No, we should have good news. I understand why you're a Brady fan, because you, as a true person of sports and outdoors and human endurance, it makes a lot of sense that you would have that special appreciation for Tom Brady's achievements. Well, anyways, so you're right, Dr. Hammer and Dr. Pasternak. This Gemara will give us a lot of food for thought as we watch the coming sports and the Super Bowl. Absolutely. So anyway, so if you catch it and it pauses if the ball, and I'm going to stop because I'm going to start exposing my amaratus about football. But suffice it to say, there's probably some relevant case law here for our favorite sport. The Gemara now adds, and this will be our closing segment. Amar Rava. Toich shloisha l'Rabbanan sorech hanacha al gabe mashahu. When we teach the halachic principle that something that lands within 3 tvachim is considered to be on the ground, toich shloisha l'Rabbanan, according to the Chachamim, sorech hanacha al gabe mashahu. It actually needs to be landed on something. Of course, this is introduced because this discussion had to do with, could something be considered suspended in the air? Yasir Maremar v'kamalash matzah. Maremar was chazering over, he was repeating this teaching. And then Amalei Ravina l'Maremar. So Ravina tells Maremar, Lav hainamas nisin. This is not precisely our Mishnah. You know what, folks? I think we're going to do this because we have to do a little background. We have to pull up a few texts. So I think we're going to stop right here. And tomorrow we'll start off with this short but important discussion about Toich Shalosh. We have a nice long Rashi to review. So I think we'll do that. So again, today we read a Mishnah and its analysis, and we started the next Mishnah about landing within or within 4 amas and then rolling outwards, or landing out of 4 amas and rolling inwards, and when it would be considered to have landed outside of 4 amas or not. And tomorrow we'll continue with this last little segment, and then we'll come to the next Mishnah, which is going to introduce us to more sea.
Oh.
The halachas of the sea is the sea considered what domain is the sea considered to be?
Yes.
And so please join us tomorrow for that. My dear friends, have a wonderful, healthy, and good day. And I hope we'll see everybody tomorrow. Gesundheit and Freiliche Heit. Thank you all so much.
Shkoach. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.